Welcome everyone. This presentation is a summary of my work through the No More Tears Public Health Project, an integrative and holistic analysis on domestic violence through collaboration, facilitation, education, leadership, awareness, healing, and expansion with Somi Ali, the founder, president, and CEO of No More Tears, and facilitator and media psychiatrist and global public health expert and best-selling author Dr. Carol Lieberman. The purpose of this public health project was multifold for program education and leadership development. The purpose was, again, in general, to collaborate, facilitate, educate groups, analyze the background information of domestic violence through the integrative and holistic analysis, particularly with No More Tears and other leading agencies, and propose programs in continuing education, leadership, growth, healing, and expansion strategies, ultimately which can be further utilized by public health professionals, educators, leaders, and students of all backgrounds universally. I wanted to briefly overview on the No More Tears Domestic Violence Holistic Mission Statement, as for this project, and especially expanding the project, I think it's very important to implement the simple, basic mission statement all over the world. So their mission statement is to provide immediate individualized assistance to victims of domestic violence through holistic services, bringing hope, happiness, and healing to survivors. And how this project fits into No More Tears and expands upon that is through the public health community collaboration endeavors, starting with the webinar and other avenues, and the project will develop a theme through which No More Tears and the affiliations can collaborate within communities, again beginning with the webinar series and continuing with other efforts to facilitate focus groups, educate teams, develop integrative and holistic strategies for healing and expansion, provide growth, awareness, and leadership for strategically studying and resolving this conflict and public health problem of domestic violence. I wanted to briefly overview on the standard definition of domestic violence. As I was searching for a standard definition for public health concepts, there were so many mixed definitions by various authors and websites and organizations that were conflicting and very confusing, that had multiple components. So I actually went back to the Essential Library series, especially meant for elemental standard education, and found a famous author and editor, Karen Kenny from 2011, who gave a standard definition that was in harmony with all the other websites, especially public health websites and CDC. So according to Kenny from 2011, domestic violence is synonymous with spousal abuse or IPV, intimate partner violence. And as you can see in the definition, there are multiple components, so it does not require for one to be in a marital relationship, in an official marriage, or it does not require sexual connection. There are other components to violence, as emotional abuse, economical, physical mistreatment, and also it's important to note that domestic violence can occur within homosexual couples as well as heterosexual couples. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this standard definition is because as I was reviewing and studying all the different organizations, even some of the leading ones like the Battered Woman Justice Project, their only focus was on one particular component of this definition of domestic violence while ignoring the other aspects. And No More Tears has done phenomenal work in focusing and encompassing the entire holistic part of domestic violence. I wanted to briefly go over the 2015 and 2016 statistics for domestic violence, as the statistics are staggering, and they affect every person in every profession, regardless of race, income, sexual orientation, men and women. So I found these current updated statistics from 2015 on the National Network to End Domestic Violence, which confirms that almost 3 million men in the U.S. are victims of physical assault. 1 out of every 4 women is involved in domestic violence in their lifetime, and more than 4 million women are assaulted physically and raped by their spouses. And details of the statistics can also be found in the No More Tears webinar website. According to the age statistics for domestic violence by U.S. Department of Justice for 2015, it's very important to note the most common age range is between 18 years and 24 years. All the other aspects are breakdowns of age categories between men and women, but in general, for everyone, it's the most highly prevalent domestic violence episodes occur between the ages of 18 and 24 years. For the race statistics on domestic violence, Everytown for Gun Safety points out that almost half of the American Indians and every 4 out of 10 black and non-Hispanic men in the U.S. have reported rape cases and physical violence by their close partners. And every second multiracial woman who's non-Hispanic has reported cases of rape and physical violence by their partners during their lifetime. Relating this with the public health perspectives, it's very important to note that domestic violence connected with racial factors, there are other factors that play a role here that includes education, pregnancy, marital status, and certain races who feel that they're more superior over others. Covering the education and socioeconomic status on domestic violence, the 2015 National Network to End Domestic Violence has illustrated that women who have acquired higher education and higher income than that of their spouses are victims of suffering from psychological abuse and domestic violence. And a major research was done through Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which pointed out that approximately women who earn 67% of the cumulative household income experience more physical and psychological abuse than those earning less than 33%. I think that's an important factor to note for future research projects through this endeavor. I wanted to briefly overview on the leading states in the United States that are highly prevalent in domestic violence, starting with Arizona, followed by California, Ohio, Massachusetts, and Georgia. And from public health perspectives, domestic violence is not a problem between just the two parties involved in the violent episode. There are extended consequences, socioeconomic impacts that affect the entire nation. This can start with homelessness that arises when some parents abandon their families and even their children. Some incidents have resulted in death of the spouses, other family members. The incidents may also lead to poverty as the family properties are become destroyed in the process. Domestic violence also adversely affects careers of victim spouses, losing their jobs and their entire livelihood. So it's very important to note that it starts in a microcosmic level, but it does expand on a grand scale. The next statistics that I wanted to cover are the top 5 leading countries. For 2015, according to U.S. Department of Justice, they've indicated that the leading country globally is United Kingdom in prevalence for domestic violence, followed by Russia, Canada, Australia, Nigeria, South Africa, and Brazil. And again, dealing with the public health perspectives for domestic violence, the consequences are extended in other areas as well, as victims lose their jobs due to the violence because they may not be able to attend the workstations regularly, which can lead to them being fired or terminated. The lack of enough employees may lead to low production of an organization, which is going to affect the economy of the country negatively. Another impact of domestic violence is death, and death of the spouses or other members that are involved, which will lead to decrease in population of the country. Domestic violence victims may be vulnerable to contracting other diseases like HIV and STDs due to forced intercourse. This is going to affect the country economically because they'll have to spend more money on curative and preventative measures for those diseases. Domestic violence also causes significant depression and suicide risks, and in turn making the children orphan and spouses become widows and widowers. All this is going to impact the economy of the country on a large scale. And there are other components of violence that impact the health, not just physical violence, but mental, spiritual, emotional, and the sexual violence may also lead to miscarriages, adolescent pregnancies, and stillbirth. And the victims may also become addicted to drugs and alcohol, and this will lead to various antisocial behaviors. This is all going to, in general, affect the country economically from the public health perspective, as the government will have to spend more resources on the rehabilitation of such people instead of developing the economy. Next, I wanted to briefly overview on my top 10 objectives that I wanted to focus on through this Fields Experience project and expand upon that through No More Tears. So my number one objective was education, and not just to raise educational awareness for domestic violence through No More Tears, but also do a thorough literature review in the past and really present an education from a holistic angle, a thorough holistic analysis through No More Tears and public health perspectives. The second aspect, an objective, was collaboration, and the initial goal was to collaborate with the leading agencies and survivors and leaders in the U.S. primarily, but the project has already expanded to attracting over 25 countries across the globe through the No More Tears website. So we're planning to really focus on the interprofessional collaboration. I'll go more in depth with this, why this is important for the public health project. The next component and objective that I focused on was researching domestic violence statistics and facts for local, state, national, and global level organizations worldwide, and really comparing and contrasting the basic foundations, needs, strategies, and operations for No More Tears and how they fit into the bigger picture with other organizations and communities in making an impact. And this is discussed more in depth in my manuscript, but I just wanted to mention that I selected these top 5 unique domestic violence organizations: the American Bar Association, which deals with domestic and sexual violence from a litigation point of view, the Asian Pacific Islander Institute, that deals with gender-based violence, especially in the Pacific Islander and Asian communities, the Battered Woman Justice Project, that provides technical assistance, training, and offers consultation services to members of criminal and public justice systems, Child Welfare League of America, which is aimed through hundreds of private and civic organizations to serve at-risk families and children, and Futures Without Violence, which is an organization that intends to progress the education, health, security, stability of girls and women, as well as boys and men worldwide. So I selected these specific, unique leading organizations in comparing and contrasting with No More Tears through similarities, differences, pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages on how No More Tears functions and can improve their status, interprofessional status. And I've discussed more of this in depth in my manuscript research as well. So I'm going to move on to my fourth objective, which was starting a facilitation session through No More Tears, and the hosting of the webinar was conducted on September in 2015 with the lead public health educator, popular global media psychiatrist, and duly certified facilitator, Dr. Carol Lieberman, who has earned her education for public health, particularly from a leading public health global institute, UCLA in California. And we developed discussion forums with leaders of domestic violence all over, created path for future sessions, and studied the topic more in depth through an integrative and holistic analysis. So the facilitation was another leading objective for this project. The next component I wanted to discuss as part of my objective was presentations and potential publications, which are all in progress. The PowerPoint that was presented through the webinar session, and the PowerPoint that I'm doing right now with manuscript and other writing projects. We have a book in progress as well with over 10 authors already contributed for collaborations. The next objective was leadership and growth endeavors for every leader that is planning to collaborate to really expand their personal vision and goals through this contributions. The next objective was advertising, marketing, and networking options, and over 1,000 members were contacted, including public health experts, scientists, physicians, Congress, media figures. RSVP letters were sent out to raise educational awareness through No More Tears, and through professional moderation options through the website, emails, personal calls were made to public health professionals, political figures, Congress members, media figures, and open This was aimed to open the webinar session via GoToMeeting to public health departments, community health centers, non-profit organizations, patients of domestic violence, legal personnel, healers, and leaders from all different backgrounds, really to diversify the audience and really connect with the common public through this public health project. The eighth component and the objective was a professional webinar session, which was successfully launched on Sunday, September 2015, this was linked out to many attendees locally, nationally, and globally, and the purpose of which was to raise awareness and education and leadership for public health interprofessional collaboration development. The next objective that I wanted to discuss were the barriers and disparities. So I compared CDC, which is Center for Disease Control, Facts and Statistics, with HP 2020, which is Healthy People 2020, federal government's prevention agenda for building a healthier nation. And according to CDC, the latest World Health Report, injuries and violence are the leading cause of death from birth up to 40 years of age, and public health professionals have become increasingly aware that domestic violence is a serious, preventable public health problem and a leading conflict affecting the overall well-being and health of millions of younger populations worldwide. CDC and other public health leaders have also contributed to the fact that domestic violence is a very complex problem, cannot be solved by focusing on one isolated issue, and needs attention from integrative and holistic aspects in the context of public health through standard universal educational process on domestic violence for prevention and treatment. And domestic violence is also linked to numerous health issues and adverse health behaviors. The economic cost each year is approximately over $8 billion, and this does not include costs incurred by legal or criminal justice systems. And I wanted to briefly mention the top 3 barriers, which I'm going to be elaborating on in my project. Number 1 is a lack of government support. This needs to be really focused on in raising awareness all over. The second barrier is lack of cooperation from organizations and leaders from all over the world. This was actually combated and really aimed to resolve this issue and been initiated through the No More Tears Public Health Project with the concept of interprofessional collaboration, education, and leadership development through public health in coming together through the website, the webinar, and educational process. And the third leading barrier is non-cooperation from victims themselves. In the views of Center for Disease Control and Prevention, most of them tend to fear their perpetrators, and that fear makes them hide crucial information to be used in the fight against domestic violence. So really we want to focus on these 3 barriers to the public health education. The next objective that I had set out was interviews. For this particular objective, my aim was to conduct key informant interviews, which included surveys by speaking to community leaders and public health experts from domestic violence organizations, public health department, community health centers, famous authors, professionals, to better understand domestic violence as a whole, based on all the collected data and information to propose initiatives, resolution strategies that are more holistic and integrative plans through No More Tears organization, but also implementing in other organizations that have collaborated to address the domestic violence phenomena in the public health context. And for the accomplishments here, I've contacted all the U.S. Domestic violence organizations, A through Z, also the leading global domestic violence organizations, and associated leading popular figures as celebrities, authors, writers, media, political figures, Congress members, leading clinicians, hospitals, public health institutions in the U.S., primarily Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Yale, UCLA, NYU, etc., and have conducted pre- and post surveys for the webinar, interviews by phone, and all the writing projects are in progress. The next component that I wanted to discuss are the core public health competencies that I have focused on. Out of the 24 that are available through my institution, I selected the top 7 to focus on and to really accomplish through this project. The first one is communication, communicating the public health information and issues effectively to health professionals, the common public, and through diverse communication channels. This is thoroughly discussed as well in depth in my manuscript, but I'm going to briefly give you an overview of the 7 leading competencies for public health that I've implemented through the No More Tears project. The second one that I selected is identifying appropriate national, state, and local public health surveillance data and other data resources and applying them to public health problems. This is thoroughly discussed in the educational component in the No More Tears webinar website with the updated statistics, the previous data, and literature review. The next competency I selected is demonstrating the ability to discuss a public health problem scientifically, including demographics, geography, magnitude, and time trends. And I've selected, I've actually expanded on this to create more of a holistic component that integrates the past literature review, but also really discussing more in-depth analysis in my manuscript. The next competency that I selected is formulating a research evaluation proposal to address public health problems through No More Tears, and I've discussed the steps leading to this as well in my manuscript. The next competency that I selected is identifying and discussing strategies for interprofessional collaboration and partnerships with other agencies, and this is a major component. It's actually a leading barrier and a major component that was successful through this project, through No More Tears, through the webinar and the website, in coming together with a collective vision. The next competency that I selected is strategic planning for health service programs for domestic violence, and this was done through stating the vision, mission, and goal through No More Tears and creating 3 specific SMART objectives, which is thoroughly laid out in the manuscript. The next competency that I selected was core functions, applying 3 core functions of public health: assessment, policy development, and assurance. And this has also been thoroughly discussed and analyzed through No More Tears, and especially in my manuscript. So this is an overview of the 7 competencies that I've selected for this public health project through No More Tears. Next, I'm going to move on to the methods section. These are the 6 primary steps that I've taken to conduct this project. The first step is identifying public health professionals, survivors, leaders, victims, leading participants involved in domestic violence agencies, No More Tears board, and global groups, and learn about them through a thorough literature review. This step was the most time-consuming. It has involved doing an extensive amount of research through agencies, through books, journals, videos, everything, and bringing everything together in a holistic manner. The second step was an educational component to raise educational awareness and leadership awareness. This was also implemented through website, webinar, and other collaborations, and I'll go more in depth with each step. I'm just going to give you a thorough overview of my 6 primary steps that I've taken. The third step is formulating collaborative strategies. This is the interprofessional collaboration component, and I will elaborate more on this in details. The fourth step was hosting a facilitation session, which was done in September 2015. The fifth step was to analyze all the data, advertise, market, and network the background information on how No More Tears operates and functions as an organization as a whole with other communities. And the final step was to create potential solutions, holistic strategies through this project in the public health context. So now I'm going to start with my step 1. Again, this was the most time-consuming step in identifying the leading domestic violence public health professionals through No More Tears and other agencies. And I'm going to go over in raising awareness through the leaders, the topmost holistic leaders that I've brought together in this project, starting with Somi, the founder of No More Tears, and review a brief biography and their leading contributions that are highlighted for this public health project primarily. So I want to briefly talk about the uniquely special leader and founder of No More Tears, Somi Ali, who's the CEO, founder, and president, and it's very important to review her biography and life in brief to understand her love, her passion, and inspiration behind No More Tears organization. So we'll start with reviewing her childhood. Somi witnessed many diversified injustices and violence growing up in Pakistan, and during her teenage years while working as a Bollywood actress in India, she also went through many transformations organizations. And after moving to U.S. to complete her education, Somi registered No More Tears in 2006 to help victims of abuse that were brought to U.S. from various countries around the world. Somi was born in Karachi, Pakistan on the 25th of March. She attended the Covenant of Jesus and Mary School until the age of 12 in Pakistan, and following that her family moved to U.S. to start a new life. So as you can see just from those facts, she's been exposed to a highly diversified lifestyle, cultures, countries, race, religion, ethnicities from the very beginning. In 1991, she moved to Mumbai, India with an interest in modeling as well, working in Bollywood films. And during those years she spent in Mumbai, India, Somi worked in 10 feature films and worked on many modeling assignments. In December of 1999, Somi moved back to U.S. to obtain a degree in psychology, and she attended Nova Southeastern University in Florida, and in 2 years' time she graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology. Somi worked at her local radio station doing talk shows on social and political issues for 2 years while working on her bachelor's degree. And it was during this time that she became interested in journalism and decided to attend the University of Miami to obtain a master's degree in broadcast journalism. So in February of 2003, while attending the University of Miami, Somi decided to move to New York with an interest in documentary filmmaking and attended the New York Film Academy. That's where she graduated with a degree in filmmaking in October of 2003, and she completed 3 short films on abortion, domestic violence, and teenage suicide. Following that, she attended Kinetic School of Broadcasting in Florida and in 2004 and obtained the degree in broadcast journalism. Somi's first documentary film is I Can Survive, covering the plight of a Pakistani gang-raped victim, Mukhtar and Mai, and the documentary aired in one of Hillary Clinton's benefits in 2005. So Somi has been working as a founder and president of No More Tears with a mission to provide individualized assistance to human trafficking and domestic violence victims. And No More Tears thus far has rescued over 400 adult victims and more than 1,200 sexually and physically abused children since its inception in 2006. Some of the other achievements that I wanted to highlight briefly is Somi's diversified background in making a difference on a humanitarian level, on a grand scale, having an expertise level on entrepreneurship, filmmaking, Bollywood actress, modeling, healing, teaching, advocating for human rights. She's also a designer, very creative designer, having her own clothing line. She's the founder and president of Somi Designs, where she's started a series of colorful t-shirt fashions, making statements about everything from religious tolerance to human rights to world peace. And she firmly and strongly believes that making choices that are good for Earth and its people, simple choices like these, you can make a difference every single day. Somi also was very instrumental in forming the Gay Straight Student Alliance on campus. She served as a board member of Social Action, Social Awareness. She was the first student staff member groomed to host the on-air campus radio program, Information Exchange. And I also wanted to really highlight Somi has been very conscientious and has given her platform to help shed light on some of the serious issues globally, especially the current problem trends and conflicts that are going on raising social awareness, not just for domestic violence, but to create a better Earth and create a lasting change, especially on terrorism, hatred of and intolerance of Muslims, and pros and cons of the war. Somi also served as Public Relations Director for the Asian American Network Against Abuse of Human Rights, for which she produced and edited several short films as well. As you can see, these are a list of some of her prestigious awards and recognitions. L'Oreal Paris Woman of Worth, the India U.S. Chamber of Commerce Award of Excellence, the American Immigration Council also recognized her for protecting immigrants. Outlet Plugging Young Woman into Arts Award in leading a creative pathway. Woman of Peace Award, Daily Point of Light Award. I wanted to briefly give you an overview of the board members of No More Tears, as I've researched thoroughly on all their backgrounds, and they have a highly diversified and creative leadership and service background, but just in general, they all come from numerous different angles: doctors, educators, entrepreneurs, technology experts, child experts, legal experts. So Somi has a very highly diversified team leading and serving her vision for No More Tears. The next leader I wanted to focus on for this public health project is Dr. Carol Lieberman. She was the lead facilitator for my project for the webinar and connections, and as a lead facilitator we were very honored to have her. She's an internationally renowned media psychiatrist, best-selling author, who's duly certified as a psychiatrist. She's earned her public health education from a highly prestigious global institute, UCLA, and she's contributed to teaching endeavors at UCLA Neuropsychiatry Institute as well. Dr. Lieberman has also been a 3-time honorary by the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences and the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences Daytime Emmy Awards. She's the talk show host of Dr. Carol's Couch. She's been profiled and quoted in newspapers and magazines worldwide. She's also the best-selling author of numerous books, audio, video, and DVD relaxation programs, and she maintains her star-studded practice in Beverly Hills. She's a very well-known psychiatrist and expert witness who testifies in high-profile trials, and she analyzes trials in the media. And she has a highly multidimensional status as a famous psychiatrist who deserves to be called Dr. Freud of our modern times. We were very honored that she's led and initiated the initial launch of the facilitation session through No More Tears for helping combat domestic violence in the public health context. And the literature review that I found by Dr. Carol is Bad Boys. There are several chapters in the book discussing domestic violence and empirical research findings, which I've elaborated on more into my manuscript research. The next leading organization that I wanted to focus on for this public health project is the Gottman Institute, founded by Drs. John and Julie Gottman, who are world-renowned husband and wife clinical psychologists for their work on marital stability and divorce prediction. The Gottmans have conducted over 40 years of breakthrough research with thousands of couples experiencing domestic violence studies, earning major awards as Florida National Institute of Mental Research Scientist Award and the American Psychological Association Division of Family Psychology and Presidential Citation for Outstanding Lifetime Research Contribution. Dr. Gottman was one of the top 10 most influential therapists of the past quarter century by the Psychotherapy Networker. And they have an extensive amount of published scientific, academic, scholarly articles, as well as authors of over 40 books. But the primary work that I wanted to highlight for this public health project that I've incorporated into my manuscript is their New York Times bestseller, The 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work in Relationship with Domestic Violence Issues. And according to the theories of domestic violence, one of the main points from this book is that a marriage is only able to work in instances where it's based on deep friendship between the parties involved, and the enhancement of love maps, the improvement of admiration for each other, turning toward each other, partners influencing each other, and the mutual solution of problems are stated as the key points that would make marriages work toward positive direction. 2 very important journal articles that I wanted to highlight by the Gottmans is Typologies of Intimate Partner Violence, Evaluation of a Screening Instrument for Differentiation. The article reveals a view that domestic violence has gradually become one of the most difficult issues to understand because of the high level of intimacy between the partners. Most of them fail to report cases of domestic violence because of their fear of losing their relationships and even their own self-esteem. So the cases of domestic violence, especially coming from batterers, become elusive in contemporary society. And I think it's a very important fact to discuss and elaborate on in future research. The next article by the Gottmans that I focused on is Group Treatment of Situational Domestic Violence for Lower Income Couples. The article focuses on treatment of domestic violence for lower income couples that suggested that treatment is required and necessary with continuous counseling of couples to ensure that they understand the situation at hand and the best ways of handling the challenges that come into their lives. And I think this is a very important factor that plays a role in violence, especially from public health perspectives. The next leader that I studied for this project has a very strong holistic background, Dr. Anna Nogales. She's a clinical psychologist, founder of Nogales Psychological Counseling, Casa de la Familia, a nonprofit organization, founder and CEO and clinical director who oversees a team of 40 bicultural, bilingual mental health professionals, as well as outreach program for domestic violence and sexually assaulted victims. Dr. Anna Nogales also participated and largely contributed for this project, especially the webinar. She's an accomplished award winner, author, playwright. She regularly writes in books, magazines, and newspapers, and has hosted her own TV and radio shows in the Spanish media. And I wanted to briefly highlight her most distinguished accomplishments are 2 humanitarian awards and features in the exhibit Latinas, the Spirit of California at the California Museum for History, Women, and Arts in Sacramento. The literature, she has a vast amount of very creative writing endeavors and projects in literature, but the one that I focused on for this project is a book on Latina community entitled Latina Power: Using Your 7 Strengths to Say No to Abusive Relationships. This book mainly focuses on the Latina community and especially on women. It encourages them to overcome the fear and intimidation in their relationships and overcome any cases of domestic violence that are labeled against them. And it also offers the journey towards an effective healing and recovery from the scourge of domestic violence. They have to base their strength to create a worthwhile life in the process. And I've incorporated her research findings as well in my manuscript as well. 2 other articles that I wanted to highlight for this public health project by Dr. Nogales are The Persistence of Domestic Violence Against Latina Women. In that article, Dr. Nogales brings out the view that victims should take the leading role in denouncing domestic violence. Victims have to be involved in informative activities that ensure they speak out against domestic violence in the course of their operations, and they should not keep quiet, as this increases the level of violence experienced by them on a daily basis, and she emphasizes this in the article as well. The Complexity of Trauma is another article that I reviewed by Dr. Nogales, which focuses on the effects of living with trauma for battered women. The most significant thing she points out in the article is that trauma leads to high level of stress, subsequent depression that could lead to even death among the battered individuals. So this needs to be diagnosed early and treated urgently through the involvement of programs and effectively creating methods for public health prevention strategies. The next leader is highly creative, Jack Patrici, the founder of Growing a New Heart. She herself was a childhood witness, a survivor, author, coach, facilitator, and consultant. She has over 25 years of experience in creative responses, especially spiritual, for survivors of destructive relationships. Founder and director of Vermont Assistant Academy, she facilitates a Growing a New Heart retreat series. She's now on her way of earning a doctorate in divinity, a truly diversified, holistic global expert in enlightening and transforming hearts internationally. She's worked as a coach, advocate, collaborative facilitator, and author, and her most famous read is Should I Stay or Should I Go? A Guide to Knowing If Your Relationship Can and Should Be Saved. And I've researched on this book for my public health project primarily, and in the context of domestic violence, this book tends to advise individuals on the steps they should take in their relationships based on the direction they need to take. One of the key points in the book is a statement that in the view that all relationships, not just domestic violence relationships, but all relationships have one problem or another, and this should be handled keenly to ensure the right decision is made. The assessment of maturity and the traumas associated with relationships should be some of the key steps taken in resolving the issues within the relationships. The ultimate decision is to prioritize one's personality and leave the relationship if everything does not work towards a positive direction. The next leader that I wanted to highlight is Araya McGarry. She's an international CEO and founder of Legacy Maker, leader, survivor, famous international Emmy Award-winning TV show host, producer, speaker, coach, with her famous read, I Won't Survive, I Will Thrive, as turning tragic into magic is her main theme. The book brings out the view that individuals need to understand the best time to get out of abusive relationships surrounded by domestic violence, and is also based on the author's personal life, as she emphasizes the best view to thrive when faced by situations of domestic violence would be to learn how to forgive those who hurt one, succeed in one's career and path, walk out of the abusive relationship, and surround oneself with people who bring positive influences into life. All these factors contribute greatly to the survival of the individuals in domestic violence relationships, according to Araya McGarry. The next holistic leader that I wanted to highlight for this public health project is Sherry Maples. Unfortunately, she could not contribute greatly for the launch of the webinar as she was on sabbatical. but she has contributed and volunteered for the Global Public Health Book Collaborative Project, and we're very honored to have her on the team. She's the founder of Mindfulness and Justice Project, a holistic Dharma teacher, keynote speaker, organizing consultant, trainer, active community organizer. She was the first director of Wisconsin Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Maple's interest in criminal justice professionals comes from the leading and learning that peace in one's own heart is a prerequisite to providing true justice and compassion to others. The Center for Mindfulness and Justice provides non-sectarian mindfulness instructions, keynote presentations, and organizational consultations and training for criminal justice professionals and employees in all arenas of life, including meditation retreats for students of Thich Nhat Hanh and other interested mindfulness practitioners. And the main focus is on collaboration, practice of mindfulness into an understandable framework for helping professionals, including healthcare workers, teachers, employees of social service agencies, who must manage the emotional effects of work while maintaining an open heart and healthy boundaries. And I just want to briefly give an overview on what exactly is mindfulness. Mindfulness is a flexible, moment-to-moment, non-judging awareness, really based on the breath, becoming aware of your breath, and it's cultivated through the practice of meditation in order to experience more calm, joy, concentration, and eventually insight, really being present into the now and awakening into the present moment and connecting the breath that bridges and unites the mind, body, and the soul. The next leader I focused on for this public health project is Dr. Lenore Walker. She's a global leader, professor of Nova Southeastern University Center for Psychological Studies, and coordinator of clinical forensic psychology concentration. She's nationally and internationally recognized expert in the area of domestic violence, the executive director of Domestic Violence Institute, as she has published extensively in journals and books around the globe. Dr. Walker has specialized in her work with victims of interpersonal violence, particularly battered women and abused children, and she's also been elected in different positions as a member of APA governance since the 1980s. She also has a highly diversified background in the media, in the public, as a leading public figure, teacher, instructor, but I wanted to really focus on her main work for this public health project is her book, The Battered Woman Syndrome, 3rd edition. She's currently writing the same version of the book, 4th edition, but I wanted to highlight this book in the study for my manuscript in this research project. The Battered Woman is one of the most significant points of the book that relates to the definition of domestic violence. It brings out the view that domestic violence is the violence of man against a woman. Most women are always subjected to high levels of violence in their own homes, but most of them find it difficult to report such cases within the required time. And this has left most of them more exposed to incidences of domestic violence and suffering as they continue taking the blame on their own. Physical and psychological abuse is prevalent. Cases of torture that most women face in their daily lives is also prevalent and mentioned deeply in the book. What I wanted to bring out is what we can take from this book is, although this book is focused on diagnosing a woman being battered, but from a holistic angle and really reviewing the current public health research paradigm in developing a holistic pathway through No More Tears in this project, really to find ways in research projects and techniques for future collaboration endeavors to diagnose the opposite gender and also individuals who are involved in other unique characteristics to be studied for future research projects. I also wanted to briefly go over her popular video, The Abused Woman, a Survivor Therapy Approach, by Dr. Lenore Walker. It's an assessment and treatment of psychological disorder video series, and the video highlights Dr. Walker's treatment approach referred to as survivor therapy, which is very popular as Dr. Walker works with different individuals. The video highlights the recreation of key moments with Sarah, a 36-year-old woman who's been battered in the largest part of her life, and the basic principles in applying survivor therapy approach that can be implemented all over the world. And I also wanted to just briefly go over what exactly is STEP, S-T-E-P, Survivor Therapy Empowerment Program? It's a 12-step evidence-based program that Dr. Walker has created to help domestic violence women understand their experience better. Step 1 is defining the problem. Step 2 is overcoming dysfunctional thinking and designing a safety plan. The third step is thinking, feeling, and acting. The fourth step is changing to positive thinking and managing their anger. The fifth step is stress management and relaxation training. Sixth is a cycle of violence and psychological effects of violence. The seventh steps she goes through are PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and battered woman syndrome effects. And step 8 is grieving and ending the relationship. The ninth step is the effects of domestic violence on children if they're involved in a relationship. The 10th is learning to ask for what they want. And 11th is building healthy relationships. And 12th is terminating the relationships. So this was also discussed further in the Battered Woman Syndrome, the book, but I just wanted to highlight that for future exercises, projects, and research that should be implemented, as Dr. Walker has a very thorough and phenomenal evidence-based study on this problem. Next, I wanted to highlight some of her leading articles that I've reviewed. There's hundreds of them. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just some of the leading ones. I want to focus more on the public health articles, especially Ethics in Public Policy is one of the articles by Dr. Walker that focuses on how the psychological theory applies to battered woman syndrome and their self-defense, and attorneys have utilized the battered woman self-defense in courts to illustrate the view that continuous assault on women could lead to increased cases of homicide because of the manner in which the mind is affected, and the expert witness has been continuously accepted in courts to prove the point that abuse relationships affect the minds of those individuals negatively throughout the courses of their lives. Another important article I wanted to highlight on public policy and domestic violence is the article that brings out the view that psychologists have played a fundamental role in the development of policies related to battered women. For instance, expert testimonies from experienced psychologists have prevented situations where women facing domestic violence have to be imprisoned for self-defense against their spouses. And public policy on domestic violence continues to be revolutionized with the involvement of psychologists who act as friends of the courts in such matters. The admissibility of expert witnesses in courts has been critical to the revolution of the entire aspect of public policy on battered women. Two other articles that I wanted to highlight for this public health project, since the initial goal was to just have a holistic analysis, but the No More Tears project has already expanded to over 25 countries, so I want to highlight Dr. Walker's international contributions. One article entitled Psychology and Domestic Violence Around the World, it highlights the view that psychologists have continued to contribute to research, clinical assessments, and interventions in the mitigation of domestic violence around the world. Children tend to be the other victims of domestic violence, and this was largely emphasized in my project, and this affects their growth in a positive manner. The global perspectives and impacts on domestic violence are shaped by different factors, including attitudes towards violence, religious beliefs, political structure, and the perception of different gender across different countries of the world. And I think that's also a very important article to review and research and really expand with all the leaders present currently today in other countries that have less access to care for domestic violence. Another article that Dr. Walker researched is Domestic Violence: International Perspectives on Social Change. This article emphasizes the view that domestic violence is perceived differently across different countries of the world. At the global level, there has been a shift as most countries have continued leaning towards the rights of victims to ensure that they're protected in the most effective manner. Women as victims have continued receiving the highest level of care and protection from the legal system from an international perspective, according to Dr. Walker. So we are very grateful to have her phenomenal research contributions and scholarly work in helping us move forward through the public health context for studying and resolving domestic violence conflict. The next leader that I wanted to focus on is a leader from an organization in London, Southall Black Sisters. We had a lead representative, Meena Patel, who was deeply involved in a complex case of an Asian woman role model, victim and survivor through her organization. Karanjit Ahluwalia, who received a Domestic Violence Honorary Award for breaking the taboo of domestic violence and her influence on the British law. law. Her case changed the definition of the word provocation in cases of battered woman syndrome, what I had previously discussed, the book by Dr. Walker. Karen Sheath was honored in 2001 for Asian Woman Awards for recognition of her strength, personal achievements, determination, commitment in helping bring light to the subject of domestic violence. And her autobiography was filmed as a famous Hollywood movie starring Miss World Aishwarya Rai in Provoked. And I want to briefly highlight this movie as this was implemented with two other films that we've compared and contrasted throughout this project, including classic Spielberg film The Color Purple, and also Somi's documentary film I Can Survive. So Provoked is a movie that highlights the story of a Punjabi woman, Karen Sheath, who gets married to Deepak through arranged marriage. And their marriage begins on good footing as Deepak pretends to be an extremely caring man and a good husband. However, he soon turns into an animal and starts abusing Karen Sheath. And she suffers 10 years of abuse and decides to retaliate by setting him on fire and leading to his death. This is a clear depiction of battered woman syndrome. As she looks forward to revenge all the sufferings that she's faced in the abusive relationship, Karen Sheath is subsequently arrested and sentenced to 12 years in prison. However, the appeal by Southall Black Sisters and Meena Patel, the lead representative, was also involved with the case and campaigning for Karen, leads to the release in highlighting the significance of the legal system in saving the battered woman from her exercise of revenge. So I think this movie is also a really important, influential movie that will help expand in future projects as well with video series through No More Tears. The next leader that I wanted to focus on is Dr. Ronna Fields, and she is also very multidimensional, founding director of Associates in Community Psychology at George Washington University in U.S. However, she has an international recognition and authority and has authored over 6 books empowering women globally. She's illuminated the world through her interdisciplinary scholarly work and multidimensional reality of women's struggle from the lens of anthropology, psychology, sociology, archaeology, women's study, law, religion, and culture. The list is endless. What I really want to highlight for this public health project that I've incorporated is her book, Against Violence Against Women, The Case for Gender as Protected Class, which explores many conflicts of women from across various different countries and cultures globally. And Dr. Fields discusses how women have been maltreated under the protection of various cultures and religion, and enlightens about the violence against women in the contemporary world, which is practiced under the disguise of religions, culture, law, and historical custom, where women are considered the property and protected as part of the patrilineal system. And she has contributed greatly to the historical component of my manuscript. I've discussed more of her research in depth in my manuscript as well. The next leader that I wanted to briefly highlight is Mildred Muhammad. She's a survivor, spiritual activist, an enlightened speaker, has been in the light of the media as well, and her famous read is A Sacred Silent, When the One You Love Becomes the One You Fear. And she's also created a survivors journal to help the victims go through their transformational processes as well. The next leader that I wanted to review is a very notable personality, Reese Witherspoon. She is a celebrity who's committed an active campaigner in ending domestic violence globally as an honorary chair of Avon Foundation charity that aims to empower women and raise awareness of domestic violence. I think it was very important to review her 2009 Refuge campaign, 4 Ways to Speak Out, as one of the leading barriers, as I mentioned, is lack of governmental support, and Reese has contributed greatly in speaking to the government in all different perspectives from public health aspects as well, and informing them of the ongoing cases of domestic violence within family and communities. The second way to speak out is speak to the local communities and raising awareness, and this has been really emphasized through this project. The third way is to speak to friends and family and sharing stories, and the fourth is to save lives by empowering women and really focus on prevention strategies, which has also been implemented, and I think this is a very important campaign by Reese that also needs to be implemented everywhere globally. The next leader that I wanted to focus on is Oprah Winfrey. She is a noble personality, multidimensional historical status, an activist, one of the most powerful advocates on women's empowerment and transformation. She's also known as a queen of social media. She's an author, writer, TV show host, actress, a philanthropist. What I wanted to highlight by her is the classic Spielberg film, The Color Purple, which is a film based on a book by Alice Walker of a young girl being raped by a stepfather and husband. It was a winner of a National Book Award. And the movie by Spielberg, in light of domestic violence, what I want to focus on for this project is that it focuses on a life of a poor African-American woman named Sally, which is played by Whoopi Goldberg, who faces abuse from a very young age. The worst thing is that she's raped by her own father, Harris, and already has 2 kids by the time she's 14 years of age. As this is not enough, the abuse continues on when her own father marries her off to a wealthy man, Albert, who treats her like a slave and subjects her to frequent cases of rape. The sufferings go into the future until the death of her stepfather, Harris, and she gets the opportunity to inherit his properties and start a small business to sustain herself. Oprah, on the other hand, who plays Sophia, also faces abuse but refuses to tolerate it. And that's kind of the highlight of the movie Color Purple by Spielberg, but I also wanted to briefly go over Oprah's personal domestic violence history as I reviewed her biography by Helen and Garrison 2nd edition for 2011. Her biography affirms that the background of Oprah's personal domestic violence history goes back to the time she moved to the inner city neighborhood in Milwaukee at the age of 6 together with her mother. And it's worth understanding that she was subjected to long working hours as a maid while in that area, and by the time she was 9 years of age she was sexually abused by different individuals, including her cousin, uncle, and even family friend. And the book also explains that she decided to flee from her home when she was only 13 years of age because of the high levels of abuse that she faced as a child. And Oprah was pregnant at the age of 14, but she gave birth to a premature child who died immediately after birth. So most of her domestic violence history comes through abuse at that early time period. And she has really transformed the world through her leadership and her multidimensional status. So I think it's really important to highlight her transformations and her journey, especially for the race African American culture as well in studying the conflict of domestic violence for future research projects. The next person I wanted to highlight is Salma Hayek. She's also a global Mexican actress and activist, powerful in promoting her Salma Hayek Foundation to raise awareness and violence against women and discrimination. And we look forward to more collaborations with her, especially through writing and video and other endeavors in leading and expanding the public health project. Next I wanted to just briefly go over, I've already talked about this with the 5 leading states. I've studied other organizations, obviously, both U.S. and globally, researched on all the listings, and they're found in the No More Tears website. But again, the leading states are Arizona, California, Ohio, Massachusetts, and Georgia, and U.S. And I've discussed the public health consequences, and also the leading countries, which are United Kingdom, and Russia, Canada, Australia, Nigeria, South Africa. Another organization that I also studied was based in Florida, the Florida Coalition Against Domestic Violence, which is a state-based organization. And I just wanted to do a brief research on this to study and compare and contrast with Somi Ali's No More Tears organization, which is also based in Florida. So now I'm going to move on to all the leading male activists that have a holistic vision or a multidimensional background. I'm going to start with the leading male activists who have contributed greatly to the webinar and the initial launch of this project. Dr. Michael Levitan. He has a multidimensional status as an instructor, leader, media spokesperson, expert witness, therapist, UCLA instructor, consultant, has contributed to reality TV shows, has been an author, and he's a leading male figure in the U.S., but he's also expanding his services globally, and he has a multidimensional status because he focuses on a holistic angle in solving this public health problem of domestic violence, in helping not only the victims and the children and the families, but also the perpetrators themselves. So he is a very unique, very inspiring individual who has participated and contributed greatly to the No More Tears webinar discussion. We're very honored to have him, and we look forward to collaborating with him and further expanding the public health project. I wanted to briefly review before I get into the other male leaders. There's a video by Katz in 2012, a popular video on men's involvement in the fight against domestic violence entitled Violence Against Women, It's a Men's Issue. And through this group, the men begin to help prevent and build awareness on domestic violence through the involvement in talks about women's rights specifically. And they're always challenged to stand out and talk about the significance of respecting the rights of women in their homes or any other place globally. And men are taught to become catalysts of change in the promotion of gender equality within their societies. They have to promote the rights of women toward the desirable direction. So I think it's a very important video to review and research and really expand on globally. I also want to briefly mention a brief highlight, a highlighted point that I've mentioned in my manuscript, as well as the history in dealing with domestic violence in men. According to the history of domestic violence, which dates back 1700s, when the English law emphasized that men were supposed to exercise some form of chastisement on their wives by whipping them, this was worsened by the Code of Hammurabi that stated that a woman was supposed to be below a man. And this is reflective in the view that the traditional domestic violence was more promoted by the established laws, also with the influences of religion, culture, and historical custom, as I mentioned earlier. And this is unlike the new emerging perspectives, especially from some of these phenomenal male leaders on domestic violence, where their view, their perspective is to see individuals and laws with both genders as equal and deserving the required level of dignity and respect. So I wanted to just briefly open up with that. I'm going to be discussing all the male leaders now, starting with Dr. Jason Campbell, who is also has a multi-talented status as a conflict resolution global expert, professor of philosophy, leader, educator, theorist, author, university instructor in the School of Humanities and Conflict Resolution Studies, and has been actively involved in multiple fields of violence prevention, especially genocide awareness, and especially gender-based genocide, which is the severest form of gender-based violence. Also wanted to mention that Dr. Campbell is a chief founder and executive director for IGAR Institute, which stands for Institute for Genocide Awareness and Applied Research, and has earned his PhD in socio-political philosophy with a dissertation on the concept of evil. And I'm one of his students, have taken several of his classes, and he's a phenomenal instructor, very inspiring, very multi-level, multi-dimensional, and has created a series of videos which can also be found in the No More Tears webinar website. Some of the books that I wanted to highlight as part of my research for this public health project that he's contributed are Books and Themes for Human Rights and Peace Resolutions, Planning a Catastrophe on the Nature of Genocidal Intent, Peace, Education, and Adult Learner, Educational Trends in the Globalized World, and Conceptions of Evil Throughout the History of Ideas, a Survey of Thought. And finally, I want to mention he's also contributed as an editor for several journals, Peace and Conflict Studies, Journal of Alternative Perspectives in Social Sciences, and he's the editor-in-chief and founder of Journal of Genocide Awareness and Applied Research. And his information is detailed also in the Inspire section of the website. The next leading male figure that I wanted to highlight for this public health project is Dr. Alan Lipman, who is also an internationally recognized expert, a male activist, a duly certified teacher of over 20 years. He's got a Juris Doctor for law as well as psychology. He's an expert peer reviewer, instructor, director, author as well, and he educates youths on various prevention strategies as well, and he's held prestigious positions in teaching at institutes like Yale, and he's also the founder and executive director at Center for Georgetown for Study of Violence, and has been nationally recognized and internationally recognized in the media as well for studying the conflict of domestic violence. I think he's a phenomenal status for a holistic thinker as well, having a duly certified background in psychology and law in studying the conflict, and also being a male activist. The next leader I wanted to mention is Mr. Farhan Akhtar. He's primarily based in India and has expanded his name to Asia, and now through this project globally. And he also has a multidimensional status as an actor, writer, director, producer, singer, humanitarian leader. He's the founder of MARD, which stands for Men Against Rape and Discrimination. It's an organization that's primarily concerned with the involvement of men in the fight against domestic violence, and emphasizes the need for men to take a leading role in fighting against any forms of violence, including domestic violence in society, and ensuring that women are respected in the highest and best ways possible. He's also written songs and poetry that emphasize a holistic focus on women in mind, body, and the soul, and focusing and resolving the conflict of violence against women. Their motto for the organization is Men of Quality Respect Women's Equality. I wanted to next focus on Mr. Victor Rivers. He's also a leading male activist, renowned Cuban male advocate for violence prevention, film star, and best-selling author. He's received several awards for his contributions as a leading activist. What I wanted to focus on is he's had a personal hands-on experience as a child in actually witnessing a family matter between his parents, and really going through the conflict, the transformations, and a biography that he's written, very impactful story, A Private Family Matter. It's a famous read that is heartbreaking, uplifting story of a family in crisis, how one man rises from the shadow of a violent father in becoming a shining example in transcendence. And I think it's a very important story to review and discuss and educate the youth, especially the coming generations of male leaders. The next male activist that I wanted to focus on is Mr. William Kilbrew IV. He's a male activist that has also received numerous awards and recognition as a survivor male activist, and especially in coaching and preventing the conflict of domestic violence. He's also collaborated and worked with the Congress people, and also has been recognized by the White House as a champion of change for his work to ending domestic violence and human rights as well. So we look forward to collaborating with him in future projects as well. The next leader that I wanted to focus on is a holistic thinker, multi-faith background, multicultural, multinational background. His Holiness Radhanath Swami. He's a world-renowned spiritualist who's lectured extensively on every venue across the globe, networking with legendary spiritualists as Mother Teresa, His Holiness Dalai Lama, President Obama, House of Commons representatives, and many other global spiritualists and iconic personalities and leading figures around the globe. The three primary contributions that I wanted to focus on for my public health project that he's influenced, especially in 2015, are for gender equality, are meetings that he's attended, one of which is a United Nations meeting that was held in September of 2015 for the involvement of faith leaders for goals in the next 15 years to focus on gender equality issues and the influences of religion in various communities. The second meeting that he had influenced is International Interfaith event entitled Awakening the Light of Dharma in November of 2015, where spiritual leaders from all different backgrounds, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islamic origin, Jewish traditions, Christianity, explored ways to create greater awareness on the concept of Dharma from a holistic perspective in public consciousness and reflections on the crisis, especially of the abuse of women. And that event was organized by a Global Peace Initiative of Women founded by Dana Merrim. The third event that he attended and also gave a keynote speech in helping vulnerable women was a leading country that's facing this struggle in London, UK. It's the Sharon Project. He has mentioned, I just wanted to briefly go over he mentioned in the keynote speech, quote, Radhanath Swami shared his personal views that tradition is meant to uphold that which is sacred, but unfortunately when things go corrupt, tradition is used to preserve that corruption, and that is what we're facing today as far as reviewing domestic violence. The laws of karma are especially relevant to our own family members, and in God's eyes, it's not that anyone is my wife or my daughter or my husband. These are all God's children, and we're caretakers wherever we are. It's our responsibility to see other human beings as caretakers of God's beloved children. And God loves all his children. That is the spirituality, and that is the morality, and that is the ethics, and that's true humanness. Just want to briefly highlight that he is also expanding his services on a global scale as well, in collaborations and other projects with transformation, leadership, and service. Especially one of his other programs is entitled Share Your Care, which can also be implemented and focused on and expanding through this public health project. The next leading male activist that I wanted to focus on is Mr. Eckhart Tolle. He also has a multinational, multicultural, holistic status as a New York Times bestselling author of The Power of Now and other series. He's a spiritualist, a holistic leader, a public speaker who incorporates his art of presence teachings and especially enlightening and awakening trauma victims who have been victimized through the process of domestic violence. The next leader I wanted to emphasize for this project that I studied is Dr. Deepak Chopra, who's a global icon, a timeless poet, prophet, sage, and scientist of holistic medicine. And he's also served as a clinical professor of family medicine and public health university in California, San Diego. He's a humanitarian leader and has written several New York Times best-selling books. What I wanted to highlight particularly that I selected his literature for my project and have incorporated throughout the website as well as my manuscript is his bestseller Peace is the Way, which emphasizes peace consciousness as a practical project for personal transformation. And I want to focus on these three components that he discusses in the book: satsang, seva, and simran. These are Sanskrit terms. Satsang in Sanskrit means to belong in a community of peace and wisdom, including meditation retreats, cooperatives, utopian communities united by a desire to find a new way to live together collectively, and sharing individual spiritual journey with the collective human family. It's one of the goals that we've incorporated through this public health project and through No More Tears. The second component is seva in Sanskrit, which means your actions harm no one and benefit everyone, also known as selfless actions. And this can be performed through outreach programs, mentoring, healing, all the movements that express a desire to offer services to altruistic actions which are not motivated by ego or selfishness, and this has also been implemented and discussed and generated through the No More Tears public health project. The third component is simran in Sanskrit, which means you remember your true nature and purpose for being here, and also having a higher vision of collective humanity. And this can be done through studying human rights, psychotherapy, holistic medicine, human potential movements. All of these movements are linked by a higher vision of what is meant to be a human. And really getting away from the dehumanization process that leads to violence, and by expressing the impulse to live in equality, dignity, and holistic upliftment and enlightenment. And also we've implemented his weekday plan, which is the personal project to transform in being the change, which is being for peace, thinking for peace, feeling, speaking, acting, and creating and sharing peace as peace consciousness. So this is one of his primary concepts and writings that we've implemented through the No More Tears project as well. The next organization that I wanted to briefly overview is also multinational, multicultural, entitled Faith and Trust Institute. They've done phenomenal research from all their religious leaders serving for their organizations with a global outreach in ending sexual and domestic violence. They provide religion-specific intervention and prevention strategies in educating materials for national, state, and community, faith-based and secular organizations, especially for domestic violence, but also extending to healthy teen relationships, prevention for teen dating violence, child abuse, children and youth exposed to domestic violence, having healthy boundaries for spiritual leaders and teachers, and responding to clergy misconduct and trafficking of people in general globally. So we've also included questions in our insightful discussions for the webinar from the Faith and Trust Institute research as well. The next organization I wanted to briefly overview is the American Bar Association, which is also global, which is also multinational and holistic. It's the largest voluntary professional organization improving the legal profession and enhancing diversity from around the globe. And they have also contributed greatly in influencing the impact of resolutions in a public health context. I'm not going to go too much in depth there. So really that is the summary of my step 1. As you can see, it's very extensive, required a lot of time, and really to bring out the best of the best leaders, holistic leaders, especially to combat one of the leading barriers, which is having a collective global vision in overcoming this public health conflict of domestic violence. My second step was to educate and raise awareness, leadership awareness, and the accomplishments through field experience were webinar success in September 2015, the website success, which has now expanded to over 25 countries, and through the educational process. And here is a list of the countries that are highlighted through this project. And I wanted to briefly overview on the website that we've created as a creative avenue for common professional base for expanding on educational endeavors through No More Tears, and the different components of the website. There's a biographical component that discusses the lead facilitators, including Somi Ali, the founder of No More Tears, Dr. Carol Lieberman, and also myself, and wanted to briefly touch base on the essential components to quickly educate everyone in raising awareness of what's available on the website. There's a resources component. Again, there's not much available there. There's a list of top domestic violence books, videos, and journals, but we're hoping that we can expand more and more through this public health project and other projects through No More Tears. The next component is the Inspire section, which is a list of distinguished global leaders with their amazing work, one of the most elite and distinguished popular leaders that have motivated everyone to contribute more to this field. This is the mostly viewed, highly viewed page on the website. It's the most popular page. And the next section is the educational section of the website that lists the statistics, the educational, detailed clinical clinical information on domestic violence as a public health problem, the definitions, the A through Z listings, all of the agencies listed in the U.S. as well as globally, and also the GLBT listings, which is gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender, which is also important to raise awareness in the couples in that area as well, because Somi Ali has done phenomenal work in helping victims in all different backgrounds that cover the definition, the general public health definition of domestic violence. And again, I want to mention the education section has up-to-date clinical information as well for physicians and clinicians as well in treating domestic violence, which is not found anywhere else. The next part of the website is a creative component, the connection section that has poetry, stories, Facebook type chatting sessions, and we started with a creative poetry for No More Tears, Somi to Infinity, which was a poetry created to attract and create another venue, a pathway in the media and entertainment avenues to really expand on relationship themes and prevention strategies in combating this conflict in the public health context. And finally, the other components of the website are updates section that has daily, weekly, or monthly updates and quizzes. The videos archive was added as some of the leading professors mentioned. There's not many significant educational videos available in studying this conflict. So we started with around 10 videos. It's expanded to 20 now, and we're hoping that everyone who's participated and is collaborating will create either home videos or professional videos, educational videos to help the youth, especially for prevention. The So this is really a summary of step 2 and the accomplishments through field experience, the webinar success, website success, to internationally expanding to over 25 countries viewing now. In progress are the book projects and all other writing projects, including magazine articles and scholarly journal articles as well, and continuing on with the future webinar series. The third step was to formulate collaborative strategies. This step is focused on the competencies of interprofessional collaboration in public health, and this is a creative step. We've already started a global public health perspectives book through No More Tears with more than 10 authors collaborating, the competency, the goal was for interprofessional collaboration to adopt common goals through No More Tears, have a common communication plan, and common professional base, which is the No More Tears webinar website. And this is really set forth by the Interprofessional Education Collaborative Expert Panel, who recommended these strategies in 2011. Next, I wanted to just kind of briefly overview on all the leaders and their backgrounds through No More Tears. They personally have their own individual collaborative projects. Dr. Laura Finley, Monica Raj is a board member, Akshay Sharma, Forrest Williams, Francis Suarez, Somu, Joel Greenberg, and some of the projects and services that No More Tears is involved in a holistic aspect in helping the victims overcome the conflict of domestic violence. I've already mentioned implementing and expanding on the research by Dr. Lenore Walker and her survivor therapy program, and how this can be implemented in all different countries and all different organizations and agencies as well, as her work is highly evidence-based. And so in summary for step 3 again, these were the accomplishments: the webinar success, the website success, the book that's in progress, poetry logs, magazine articles, videos, and continued future webinar series. Step 4 was the facilitation session and involving all the creative leaders and co-facilitating with Dr. Carol Lieberman. Again, the session was conducted in September of 2015, the live session, and there were pre-surveys that were taken before the session and post-surveys, and those who could not attend the session were requested to do a pre-survey and then watch the video and do a post-survey. So based on the findings for the pre-survey, 64% had mentioned that they had not attended anything like this before that involved an integrative and holistic component that dealt with focusing on the whole person in mind, body, and the soul in studying the conflict of domestic violence. 65% also mentioned that they did not attend anything relating with public health issues in studying the conflict of domestic violence. 71% recommended the online studies to be highly beneficial. 82% voted that they would actively participate in current or future discussions for webinars. 79%, and this is a very important number, mentioned that they had over 5 years of experience and expertise in educating communities for domestic violence. This is important to note because it shows the level of expertise and experience that these participants have had in this project that have contributed greatly to expanding and learning about domestic violence for public health. And then for the post surveys, which were done after the live session or after watching the video of the webinar, 93% voted that they found the No More Tears webinar website and resources useful for education, collaboration, and raising awareness for domestic violence. This was a very striking finding. 99.969% recommended and found the No More Tears webinar and website as a very useful source for enhancing communications and interprofessional collaboration with other domestic violence agencies. And as I mentioned in my manuscript and also in the beginning of this presentation, this was one of the leading barriers, top 3 barriers, in not having a collective vision and goal to move forward in resolving this conflict globally. No More Tears through this project has really achieved this, and we hope to progress even more and expand more in the interprofessional collaboration strategy. for public health. The next figure is the questions that were discussed in the webinar. 92% voted that the No More Tears webinar were very helpful in the questions and the reflections and engaging in insightful discussions. The next aspect of this post-survey was how often we should conduct a webinar. The majority voted every 6 months. And also how many people should be involved in active participation and talking discussions. Majority voted less than 10 people. So overall for step 4, these are the accomplishments: successful webinar, surveys, the website, and interprofessional collaboration strategies, which have already expanded now to an audience viewing for more than 25 countries. We also reviewed and compared and contrasted the films Color Purple, Hollywood film Provoked, and Somi's documentary film on Mukhtar and Mai, which was aired at Hillary Clinton's benefit, and are also expanding on other projects as books, poetry, articles, online library collaborations. There was also another component that most of the people are not aware of, a magazine PowerPoint presentation that I've started with No More Tears specifically, but I may expand with everyone else. The point is to create magazine articles with each expert, but ultimately our future goal, the ultimate goal, is to create a magazine of our own. So this has also been initiated, and we hope to progress in that endeavor as well. And also with the scholarly articles in researching, reading, and expanding and creating manuscripts as well, and future research projects as well through No More Tears. So the 5th step of the methods deals with analyzing all the data, advertising, marketing, and networking, and expanding. We've already hit over 25 countries. This is more than a desired goal. And the overall accomplishments for analysis and discussion, the pre and post surveys gathered overall cumulative represent over 90% of the people found the webinar, the website, and the resources useful for enhanced communications and creating innovative collaborations and expansions. And the advertising component has already been implemented, and majority of the people, especially in the Inspire section, the most distinguished and elite leaders, have requested to keep up the website and keep progressing indefinitely. The next step that I want to mention is the final step of the methods, which is coming up with holistic and integrative strategies in studying this conflict from the public health context. And overall, the accomplishments were education, expansions to webinar and website, research discussions, and ideas for future connections and projects, the writing projects that are already in progress. So the overall results of this public health field experience was creating a holistic integrative action plan and awareness, the webinar success, writing endeavors in progress, books, poetry, articles, magazines, networking and advertising success, education and leadership developmental success, healing and awareness success, collaboration success, and providing strategies for healing, solutions, transformations, and education for the public health professionals through No More Tears. And the limitations and challenges were really the time for the project. The execution of the project was the biggest challenge, and maintaining the webinar website, which requires constant attention, especially from a holistic perspective, and requires regular awareness and constant improvement, which we're planning to maintain. And the next steps, I guess, would be to keep the website up, continue with the interprofessional development, the Global Public Health Perspective book project, and expand with other series of books and additional writing endeavors, whether it's a small endeavor like writing a small article for a magazine or books, or even making movies and videos, and also possibly even creating our own magazine in the process. So really the possibilities are unlimited to expand for all leaders and all agencies that have collaborated. Finally, I would just like to thank No More Tears, Somi Ali, the president, and Mr. Akshay Kumar, one of the board member, for allowing me to complete my fields experience and connection within their organization, and Dr. Carol Lieberman for co-facilitation process, and all the participants who have contributed greatly in inspiring everyone and allowing this amazing experience to truly unfold on the path of So Me to infinity. Even though my fields aspect is over, but we will be continuing to connect and expand and grow from this point forward.